This is the Water Quality Association podcast, promoting the betterment of water quality around the world. And hello, I'm your host, Wes Bleed.
And making sure that we're ready as an industry, right, to meet this increased demand potentially, making sure that we are tracking when these notices go out, making sure that we are doing our best to make sure that these products are maintained when they're installed or sold to a consumer. So certainly a number of items that we can focus on over the next few years, but a lot of it comes down to education and awareness of these new regulations.
That's WQA Government Affairs Director Jeremy Pollack with an update on the lead and copper rule from the U.S. EPA. And welcome to the weekly podcast from the Water Quality Association, the leading voice of the residential, commercial, and industrial water treatment community. Find us at WQA.org. Joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a show. That's the magic of podcasting, of course. And be sure to share the podcast with someone you know. We also feature our podcasts on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/@waterqualityassociation-videos. In this episode, we feature a conversation with WQA's Government Affairs Director, Jeremy Pollack, as we update you on the lead and copper rule improvements and their impact on the drinking water systems across the country and on the water treatment industry. We discuss the lead pipe replacement efforts, the tap sampling requirements, the lower lead action, and how point of use and point of entry products will factor into the new program. Later, we'll have our WQA tip. Now, on to our conversation on the Water Quality Association podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be discussing the latest changes or revisions or improvements to the lead and copper rule in Washington. And our guest is
Jeremy Pollack.
Hey, Jeremy, how are you? Jeremy's the Government Affairs Director for WQA. And Jeremy, if I'm not mistaken, are we approaching year 3 since you joined WQA?
Yep, I think we're just 2 months away from my 3-year anniversary here at the Water Quality Association.
That is fantastic. And of course, you are one of the busier, if not the busiest, employees at WQA because you've got your hands on so many different pieces of legislation. You're monitoring what's going on in Washington. You're monitoring state legislatures. You're monitoring bills all over the country that have been proposed. So let's start with the very basic, the lead and copper rule. What is it and what's been improved?
Well, the lead and copper rule started in 1991, so this is something that's been around for quite a while. The EPA has set upon themselves that they're going to set federal standards for water quality across the United States, which has had an amazing impact and made vast improvements. More recently, the action level for lead was at 15 parts per billion, but with some more recent updates to the rule, it's likely that we'll see changes to that.
All right. So what was announced just recently that would qualify, I guess, as an improvement, right? These are improvements that are being made. And typically improvements would also mean that things are becoming more, restrictive as it pertains to lead and copper.
Right. So there's 2 different rules recently that the EPA has added as part of an update to the lead and copper rule. One is the lead and copper rule revisions. This was finalized in 2021, but is going into effect on October 16th, 2024. That had some very important changes to the rule, such as water utilities need to create an inventory of lead service lines or study if their lines are made of an unknown material and notify their customers. So in the next few days here and throughout this month, we'll see a number of people across the United States really find out how their water is being delivered and understanding what steps they may need to take, right, to improve their water quality. And that's really the first step in addressing lead service lines on a national level, is really understanding where they're located. So one thing I want to emphasize here again is lead and copper rule revisions is taking that inventory of lead service lines or pipes that are made out of an unknown material, right? We need to understand where these issues are across communities in the United States. The LCRI, right, is once we have that information, is that next step of a solution. So the lead and copper rule revisions going into effect on October 16th. They published the LCRI, the lead and copper rule improvements, prior so that utilities would start understanding these next steps. So as far as the next 3 years, right, October 8th is when the lead and copper rule improvements was finalized. In 3 years from the final publication in the Federal Register of that regulation, that rulemaking, there's these additional steps that the Biden administration laid out. The first one being that they want to replace all lead service lines within 10 years, and there's very limited exceptions to that portion of the rule. The next step was lowering the action level from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. The maximum contaminant level goal still remains at 0, because at the end of the day, there's really no safe level of lead or this neurotoxin. And really emphasizing that if there is construction, right, on a galvanized pipe or a lead service line that can potentially lead to short-term contamination, that point of use systems must be distributed for at least 6 months, including additional cartridges. It also improves tap sampling, which is really important, including measuring and requiring a collection of water from the first liter and the fifth liter. In addition to that, there's public education requirements. So even if your water might not be out of compliance, letting communities know what additional steps they can take to improve their water. Because although the action level has been lowered to 10 parts per billion, if you have children, right, lead can impact their brain development. And you really don't want to be at 9 parts per billion or maybe 8 parts per billion. You really, it's up to you to take those additional steps. And it's often hard for folks to understand where to find these resources. So they're including information on ANSI accredited certified products, point of use systems that have been tested and assured to reduce lead in drinking water. And so I think that education is an important piece. Additionally, if within a 5-year time period, if there's 3 exceedances, the utility is then required to provide point of use technology, these point of use systems, such as a pour through pitcher or something that's maybe installed in the home under the sink or on the faucet's head, and work, right, to distribute, maintain, and operate these systems. So certainly a nod to our industry, right, of being part of that solution. They've seen this already effective in hundreds of cities across the United States that have already utilized this technology. And I think this is a natural step forward, right? There's not just one way to fix this issue. We actually have to use a number of different solutions, and especially for water that is constantly out of compliance. So again, 3 or more exceedances, it makes sense that they're taking these additional steps to help these communities by utilizing point of use systems.
Schools often come up when it comes to the topic of lead. How will schools be addressed in these improvements?
It's a great question. There's quite a bit in here in schools that we're still digging through because, again, this regulation was recently published. It's 890 pages long. However, this is going to improve tap sampling and does require a certain percentage of sampling for schools. There has been a number, I think almost all 50 states either have mandatory or voluntary state school programs. This is really the first nationally kind of recognized standard for school testing that's really going to be enforced. So definitely another step forward in making sure that schools are taking that additional step. We always understand that, again, budget is a big issue when it comes to educational facilities. So certainly utilizing point of use has been seen as a cost-effective measure to help schools across the country. Something else that I would like to flag that was mentioned in the comments here is filter first legislation. This is legislation that we've seen passed in Michigan, where essentially for schools to test their water, but knowing that they're limited in budget, that they should really start putting funds and allocating them, just jumping straight forward to a solution for lead. And so there's quite a bit there that the federal government is also looking at for schools down the road.
And then, of course, the idea or the issue of funding always comes up as well when you look at mandates and requirements and things like that. And then you say, well, are there any funds associated with such a program? And what's the answer to that?
Yeah, the Biden administration has already been putting out a number of funding for lead service line replacement and for these programs. Certainly we'll see what's appropriated down the line. There's also a number of existing grant and revolving funds that states have utilized with lead. This is not a new issue to us. We're familiar with what's gone on in Jackson, what's gone on in Flint. And so for quite a while, we've seen investment, right, in remediating and reducing lead in drinking water. However, if you look at the number of lead service lines that are predicted to be in the United States, it's going to be very, very expensive to replace all of them. And again, I think this is why the EPA has looked at alternative, treatment techniques to reduce lead in drinking water.
So then, Jeremy, step us through the next steps on this. Are there next steps? What else do we expect to be forthcoming from the EPA? And how will you be monitoring all of that?
Well, if you're asking specifically about the water treatment industry, I think there's a lot more that can be done. Starting October 16th, several residents are going to get notices in communities, right, that there might be lead service lines, right, that are providing water to them. And they're not going to want to necessarily wait for these 3 years for the lead and copper rule improvements to go into effect. So what can we do in the meantime to educate communities on how to take steps on their own to improve their water quality? Because these contaminants, this neurotoxin, can have effects today, right? It's not going to hit you in 3 years from now. Additionally to that, as utilities gear up to implement the lead and copper rule improvements in a few years from now, we need to make sure that we're educating them on best practices and making sure that they actually understand how this technology is best utilized. Where are they most effective? What are also some of the additional benefits of this? Several water treatment systems are also certified for other claims, for other contaminants. So there'll certainly be some additional benefits as well, depending on the product. And so certainly looking at educating consumers, drinking water officials in a variety of states, but also the utilities themselves. So there's got to be a lot of community outreach going forward. Additionally, it's possible that gaps will still remain, and making sure that we're ready as an industry, right, to meet this increased demand potentially, making sure that we are tracking when these notices go out, making sure that we are doing our best to make sure that these products are maintained when they're installed or sold to a consumer. So certainly a number of items that we can focus on over the next few years, but a lot of it comes down to education and awareness of these new regulations.
So what information, Jeremy, is available for members to understand more about the lead and copper rule, these improvements and revisions?
All right. So this is an 890-page regulation. The publication has a number of comments that it responds to and justifications. And certainly we know that most of the people in this industry are busy day to day with their jobs. So one of the main membership benefits is that we provide one-pagers or packets of information on regulations, such as the lead and copper rule improvements and on the lead and copper rule revisions. We have an FAQ document. We're likely working on some slide decks and briefings. But also we have one-pagers that can be used to educate policymakers, that could be used to educate the public, and certainly want to continue, right, to work on this mission to improve water quality across the United States on lead and on other contaminants. But certainly this is a major membership benefit of joining WQA.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So WQA's government affairs page on the website, WQA.org, is the place to start. And again, information available to members of WQA, some, in general to the public, but more details and more information, more briefings, more webinars, and all of that available to members. Well, Jeremy, thanks for helping us understand these changes and improvements. So critical and information that's important for our members to understand and then utilize in these coming months and years. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our WQA tip: take advantage of free sessions of 4 instructor-led training courses in a special open house the week of October 21st, 2024, online at WQA.org. You can see for yourself how you can benefit from WQA's live online professional training. 4 different sessions are part of the open house, each offering identical course material in 2 different time periods. Enjoy as many courses as you would like, during the special week. More information is available at the Education Open House page of WQA's website, WQA.org. Thanks for joining us for the Water Quality Association podcast, bringing you the latest news and insights from the association, our members, and outside experts to help you better serve your customers and grow your business. Learn more about water and water treatment at our consumer website, betterwatertoday.org, and learn more about professional certification, product certification, and how you can become a WQA member at WQA.org. Until next time, this is Wes Bleed. So long from the Water Quality Association.